Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Our next speaker is Ugan Maistry from FIRtech, where he's the CEO. And when I saw this title on the schedule, I thought I'm definitely going to stay around for this. Why are there still so many jobs? Ugan's got some challenges with his camera, so we might not see him, but Ugan, I'm sure we can hear you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Johan. Good afternoon, colleagues. Johan, sound check, all good?
All good, Ugan, thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks for staying for the session. As introduced by Johan, I'm Ugan Maistry, and I'm from FIRtech. So I think maybe disclaimer up front, I think for colleagues, if you're looking for technical insights into AI, this is absolutely the wrong session. This session is more looking at AI from a socioeconomic point of view. So, I mean, Johan mentioned it was an interesting topic, and over the last couple of days, I've certainly had some calls from colleagues asking me about the topic, why there's still so many jobs. These queries range from interesting topic to why am I being so insensitive about our current unemployment crisis. So I think maybe firstly, just to set the record straight, I am acutely aware of our current unemployment crisis, and more so how it is affecting the youth in our country. In the last quarterly survey, the youth unemployment rate was just over 63%, and the general unemployment rate was 32.5%. And this is the narrow definition. The expanded definition for unemployment, the unemployment rate is closer to 43%. Now, there are many supply side and demand side factors that influence unemployment, but I don't plan to discuss these this afternoon, except to mention that technological change is exacerbating the structural mismatch of skills that we have and that we are producing as a country. So, coming back to the topic, and for those of you that are not aware of this term called facetious, I thought I'd share its definition. It's when one treats a serious issue with deliberate, inappropriate humor, right? Hence, I am being very facetious in my presentation title. Now, I wanted to put that forward as a disclaimer because the last thing I want is for Julius and the Red Berets to pitch up at my office or home accusing me of being insensitive. So the acceleration of technology in all facets of work are definitely forcing everybody, young and old, to consider the impact of technology on their livelihoods. The most famous of which is whether robots, so be it the physical robots or be it software robots, are going to take away their jobs. And what does the future of work look like? Now, these are all valid concerns and questions, but we're going to park this for now. So first, we're going to start with a little bit of trivia. So did you know that in 1981, 40 years ago, Standard Bank installed the first ATM in South Africa? Now, this was in response to the demand from customers for after-hours banking, primarily cash withdrawals. But this innovation had unintended consequences. So fewer tellers were needed at the branch due to self-service cash withdrawals and deposits, which led to fewer tellers being employed per branch. But this in turn reduced the cost of operations per branch, which meant that they could increase their branch footprint, which meant more jobs. But the type of jobs was different. The bank was now offering credit cards, home loans, and other banking products. And so there was this evolution of skills being demanded and created. Tellers became the front office salespersons. And then this very same bank, in 2019, not so long ago, closed 100 branches of their bank, all in response to new channels to market. And this is what the famous economist Joseph Schumpeter would have called creative destruction. right? It's where something new was created that replaced something old. So if you think about it, many of the great inventions since the first industrial revolution were designed to replace human labor. Tractors were developed to substitute physical human effort for mechanical power. Assembly lines were engineered to replace inconsistent human handiwork with machine perfection. Computers were programmed to swap out error-prone, inconsistent human calculation with digital perfection. Now, clearly, these inventions have worked. We no longer dig ditches by hand, or make tools by hand, or do bookkeeping with actual books. And yet, the percentage of adults employed today is far higher than it was 2 decades ago, barring, of course, the impact of COVID in 2020. Now, this poses a bit of a paradox. So, with machines increasingly doing our work for us, why does this not make our labor redundant and our skills obsolete? In other words, why are there still so many jobs? So I'm going to try and answer that question today and tell you what this means for the future of work and the challenges that automation poses and the challenges that it doesn't pose for our society. But first, let's consider the relationship between growth and unemployment. Now we know that there's this inverse relationship between these two measurements. So when growth is low, unemployment is high, and vice versa. But we also know that growth is best measured by GDP, which we know is a monetary measure of the market value of all the goods that we produce within a specific period of time. But we also know that GDP is influenced by two factors. The first being our input resources, so that being our natural resources, labor, capital, and know-how, and productivity. But economists will tell us that 1/3 of GDP is influenced by the factors of production, which are your input resources, and 2/3 are influenced by productivity. So what this means is that no matter how much of input resources we throw at the problem, if we are not being productive, we will not make any significant impact on GDP. Now, as technologists, I'm sure that we all know or suspect that technology is an enabler in any business and has the potential to drastically improve productivity if adopted well. This could not be more true for these newer generation technologies like RPA, machine learning, and AI. So if technology increases productivity, then surely this will have a positive impact on GDP. And if GDP increases, then growth increases and unemployment decreases. So where new demand will spur on new businesses and new businesses will spur on new employment. Now, technology itself is not the only factor that affects productivity. And I think especially for us here in South Africa. In South Africa, we have other factors to consider. So things like, do we have the right training and skills for the job? Is there availability of energy and power from Eskom? Is there the availability of finance? Right? Is there time? All of these things at the moment are in short supply. So my argument here is that in as much as technology may displace jobs in the short term, in the long run, it is a creator of jobs and wealth. This is the unfortunate process of creative destruction. Now, I'm hoping that over the last few minutes, I've actually made my economics professor very proud of this argument. And hopefully I've convinced you of this relationship between jobs and growth. So coming back to the question, why are there still so many jobs? There are actually two fundamental economic principles here at stake. One has to do with human genius and creativity, and the other has to do with human insatiability, or greed, if you like. So let's go back to our ATM story. On the one hand, these ATMs replaced a lot of teller tasks. The number of tellers required per branch drastically reduced, but then banks quickly discovered that it was cheaper to open new branches, and thus the number of branches increased. The net result was more branches and more tellers. But these tellers were doing something somewhat different work. As the routine tasks were now being done by ATMs, these tellers became more like salespeople, forging relationships with customers, solving problems, and introducing them to new products like credit cards and home loans. So there were more tellers doing a more cognitively demanding job. There's a general principle here. Most of the tasks we do require a variety of skills, be it cognitive or manual effort. By automating a subset of those tasks doesn't make the other ones unnecessary. In fact, it makes them more important. It increases their economic value. Now, I'm sure that most of you are aware of this proverb, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Now, in a production function, there is a series of links in a chain, and every link needs to hold for the production function to be successful. If any one of them fails, then the product or the service fails. Therefore, automating a subset of tasks or links in a chain, it increases the economic value of the other links in the chain. So what does this mean? In other words, it means that as we automate more of these links, and these links become more robust and more reliable, the human link becomes more essential, and everything depends on it for success. The point here is that in as much as the ATMs could do cash handling tasks faster and better than the tellers, that did not make the tellers redundant on its own. It increased the importance of their problem-solving skills and their relationships with customers. And this same principle applies to all other occupations. As our tools improve, technology magnifies our leverage and increases the importance of our expertise, creativity, and judgment. Now that brings us to the second principle, human insatiability, or greed, as I'd like to call it. So while the first principle talks to the importance of the jobs that people do and how these can't be replaced by machines, it doesn't tell us how many jobs there will be in the future. In the early 1900s, 40% of all employment was in agriculture. Today, it's less than 2%. So why are there so few farmers today? It's certainly not because we are eating less. Technological change and productivity improvements over the last century means that a couple million farmers now are capable of feeding the planet. So clearly, technology does have the ability of displacing jobs. Farming is just one example, and there are many others like that. But what is true for a single industry is not necessarily true for an economy as a whole. Many of the industries which we now work in, health, medicine, finance and insurance, electronics, computing, these were tiny or even non-existent a century ago. Many of the products we spend our money on today, air conditioners, sports vehicles, computers, mobile devices, these are either unattainably expensive or had just not been invented a century ago. So as automation frees our time, it increases the scope of what is possible. We invent new products, new ideas, new services, and that takes our attention, occupies our time, and spurs consumption. Now, some of us might feel that Netflix and TikTok are frivolous, but people desire these things and they are willing to work for them. The average worker in 2015 wanting to attain the average living standard in 1915, so 100 years prior, could do so by working just 17 weeks a year, so 1/3 of the time that we currently work. But most people don't choose to do that. They are willing to work hard to attain the material things that they desire. So if you agree with these two principles, human genius and creativity, and human insatiable greed, then you would agree with me that there will be jobs. But does that mean that there's nothing to worry about? Automation, employment, robots, jobs, it'll all take care of itself? No, that's not my argument. Automation creates wealth by allowing us to do more work in less time. But there is no economic law that says that we will use that wealth well. And that is worth worrying about. And this brings me to the challenge we face today, the challenge that automation poses for us. The challenge is not that we are running out of work. We have a robust demand for highly skilled labor. But our supply market is filled with semi-skilled labor. As an example, looking at economic or employment growth in the US looks something like a barbell. On the one hand, you have high education, high wage jobs like doctors, lawyers, programmers, and engineers, where employment is robust in these areas with good employment growth. Similarly, employment growth is robust in many low-skilled, low-education jobs like waiters, deliveries, cleaning, security, and home helpers. And at the same time, employment is shrinking in many middle education, middle wage, middle class jobs like clerical jobs, sales, and other production orientated types of jobs. Now, the reason behind this contracting middle is not mysterious. Many of those middle skill jobs use well understood rules and procedures that increasingly can be programmed in software and executed by computers. The challenge is that it shrinks the size of the middle class and threatens to make us a more polarized society. This is what the economists would call employment polarization. On the one hand, you have a set of highly paid, highly educated professionals doing really interesting work. And on the other hand, you have a large number of citizens in low-paid jobs whose primary responsibility is to see to the health and comfort of the affluent. Now, this is definitely not my vision of progress, and I doubt that it's yours either. But there is some encouraging news. We have faced these cycles of automation and obsolescence many times over in the past, and we have come through successfully. It would be foolish for us to believe that our fates are sealed. That's not decided by machines. It's not even decided by the market. It's decided by us and our institutions. Now, I started this talk with this paradox, right, about machines increasingly doing our work for us, and why does it not make our labor redundant? The first reason is that technology magnifies our leverage and increases the importance of our expertise, creativity, and judgment. The second is that we have this endless creativity and an endless desire for more. We can never get enough. There is always new work to do. And if we think about it, over the centuries, we have been told by many people, scholars, the media, technologists, that we are running out of work and making ourselves obsolete. Yet time and time again, we have proven them wrong. Human ingenuity has always risen to the challenge, and I see this time as being no different. Now, I can't tell you what we're going to do for work in 10, 20, or 50 years from now. But luckily, the future doesn't hinge on my imagination. It hinges on yours, our kids, and the next generation. And I'm not willing to bet against their ingenuity and creativity. Are you? Thank you. Back to you, Johan.
Again, thank you. What a fantastic talk, and what a positive view, because I think we are bombarded with all the negative, scary scenario views about the future of our children and what kind of work they will do one day. And I think it's worth taking it seriously, but it's also good to hear that positive can happen. Very well done, Ugan, and a great talk. Thank you so very much. Everyone, we're going to have a quick break again, and then we're coming back for the next session by a speaker, and that will be followed by a panel discussion before we end off the day. So we'll see you in about a minute's time. Thank you.